Right now, somewhere off the west coast of Africa, a cluster of thunderstorms is spinning westward across open ocean, and the people whose job it is to watch it for a living are more nervous about this one than almost anything else they have tracked all year. Not because it is already a monster. It is not. Right now it is barely organized, a loose tangle of showers riding a tropical wave. But every model, every satellite loop, every briefing coming out of the forecasting community this week is circling the same uncomfortable question. What happens if this thing survives the next 5 days? Because if it does, it is heading directly into the most dangerous stretch of real estate in the entire Atlantic basin, at the exact moment of the year when hurricane season stops being a slow build and turns into a sprint. And behind it, quietly, almost without anyone outside the meteorology world noticing, an entirely different kind of extreme event has been building for months, one that could end up shaping American weather for the next year. Today we are laying out exactly what is developing, why the people whose entire career is reading these signals are using words like alarming and unprecedented, and what it actually means for the United States in the days and weeks ahead. No dramatizing, no guessing, just what the data says and why it matters. If you want to be the first to know the moment this storm gets a name and a forecast track, subscribe right now. It is free, and it takes 2 seconds. A thumbs up tells the platform to put this in front of more people who need to see it before the weekend. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Now let us get into what is actually happening. Let us start with the storm, because it is the most immediate piece of this. Late this week, a large area of low pressure rolled off the West African coast, and almost immediately the senior meteorologists who track every single one of these systems noticed something. Dozens of these tropical waves come off Africa every hurricane season, one every 2 to 4 days at this point in the year, and the overwhelming majority of them fizzle out over open water without anyone outside the forecasting community ever hearing about them. This one looked different from the start. It looked more organized, more symmetrical, with a thunderstorm cluster that held together instead of falling apart the way most of these waves do in their first 48 hours. Forecasters at AccuWeather's Hurricane Center flagged it almost immediately as having a high chance of becoming the next tropical depression of the season. If it strengthens into a named storm, it already has a name waiting for it. Dolly? That name has been sitting on the 2026 Atlantic storm list for years, assigned in advance the way all of these names are, just waiting for a storm strong enough to claim it. Here is where it gets complicated, and where the uncertainty that is making forecasters uneasy actually comes from. This wave is moving into an atmosphere that is almost split in two. On one side, there's a pocket of weaker wind shear and higher moisture that the wave is moving through right now, through the end of this week, and that pocket could allow it to organize and strengthen. On the other side, waiting for it near the Leeward Islands is a wall of hostile, disruptive upper-level winds, the kind of wind shear that tears a storm circulation apart before it ever gets the chance to become something dangerous. That belt of shear has been sitting over the Caribbean basically all season, and it is the entire reason 2026 has been such a quiet year in the tropics so far. Combined with pockets of dry, dust-laden air blowing off the Sahara, it has created what meteorologists describe as a genuinely hostile environment for anything trying to develop across large stretches of the Atlantic. So here's the fork in the road. If this tropical wave strengthens quickly over the next few days, while it still has access to that weaker wind shear pocket, it is more likely to curve north and head out into the open Atlantic, away from land, away from the United States entirely. That is actually the less concerning outcome for anyone on the American coastline. But if it stays weak, if it remains just a tropical depression or a struggling tropical storm as it crosses into the Caribbean, it can end up doing something that sounds paradoxical, but is exactly the pattern hurricane experts watch for every single season. A weak, disorganized system can survive longer at low intensity, specifically because it is not organized enough for the wind shear to fully destroy it. And that lets it keep drifting west past the islands into the warm water near Puerto Rico, near the Bahamas, and potentially toward the U.S. mainland, where conditions could turn back in its favor. One of the lead hurricane forecasters covering this system put it plainly this week. Ocean waters near and north of the Caribbean are warm enough right now to support real development, provided the atmosphere around the storm becomes even slightly more cooperative. That is the exact setup meteorologists are the most uneasy about. Not a storm that is already a monster, but a weak, wandering system with a wide range of possible outcomes, moving toward warm water, at the exact moment of year when the Atlantic typically explodes with activity. And that timing detail matters more than almost anything else in this story. The Atlantic hurricane season does not ramp up evenly across 6 months. It has a hard, sharp acceleration point, and we are standing right at the edge of it. From the last week of August into the first weeks of September, tropical activity historically surges, climbing toward its climatological peak around September the 10th. Historically, the Atlantic's first hurricane forms by the beginning of August. This year, as of this week, the season had not produced a single hurricane yet, only a handful of tropical storms. One meteorologist tracking the season bluntly called the Atlantic overdue for its first hurricane. That sounds like good news on the surface. Fewer storms, a quieter year. But quiet does not mean safe, and overdue does not mean the danger has passed. It means the pressure behind the curtain has been building while almost nothing has come through it yet. The reason this season has been so unusually quiet traces back to one specific climate pattern that is currently doing something meteorologists have not seen in generations. A powerful El Niño has been strengthening through the summer, and multiple forecasting teams now say it has a real chance of becoming the strongest El Niño ever measured, going back through the historical record to 1850. To put a number on that, in July, global sea surface temperatures surpassed the record level set during the major marine heat wave of 2023, coming in roughly 2 degrees Celsius above the long-term average, which translates to close to 4 degrees Fahrenheit of warming across huge stretches of open ocean. According to an analysis built from NOAA data and a historical hurricane database maintained at the University of Miami, if this El Niño verifies at the strength current forecasts suggest, it would surpass the previous record holder, a powerful El Niño event from the winter of 1982 into 1983, and it would sit well above other historically major events from 1997, from 2015, and from the very earliest instrumented records in the late 1800s. One senior long-range meteorologist covering this pattern made an important point that cuts through a lot of the noise around whether it technically breaks a record. It does not really matter whether this becomes the single strongest El Niño ever measured. What matters is the impact, and the impact is already showing up clearly in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Here is what that impact actually looks like in practice, because El Niño is not just an abstract ocean temperature statistic. It reorganizes entire global weather patterns. In the Atlantic, a strong El Niño increases the disruptive high-altitude winds that tear developing storms apart, which is exactly why this year has produced so few storms, despite record warm water sitting right below the surface. That warmth has not gone anywhere. It is still there, still available as fuel, which is exactly why forecasters keep repeating the same warning, even as they lower their overall storm count predictions for the season. Fewer storms does not mean less danger to the United States. In fact, one of the more unsettling parts of this year's outlook is that exceptionally warm water sitting close to the American coastline can allow a storm to develop or intensify rapidly right before it makes landfall. Compressing the warning time, coastal communities get to almost nothing. A storm does not need the wide-open Atlantic to become dangerous. It can build its teeth in the final days before it reaches shore, in water that has been sitting there all summer, absorbing heat, waiting. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, the same El Niño pattern is reshaping an entirely different kind of disaster risk, one that has already been playing out for weeks across the American West. Persistent, extreme to exceptional drought has gripped large sections of the western United States this year, and that drought has been feeding directly into one of the more intense wildfire seasons the region has experienced recently. In just the past several days, a wind-driven wildfire near Reno tore through a community and destroyed dozens of homes before crews could contain it. Separately, another wildfire more than doubled in size within a matter of days, growing to over 80,000 acres and destroying structures in its path as it moved through dry, drought-stressed terrain. Extended heat is compounding all of it. Los Angeles has been enduring a heat wave that forecasters now expect to stretch into the final weekend of August, rather than breaking early, keeping temperatures elevated and keeping fuels across the region bone dry at exactly the time of year when a single spark, a downed power line, a stray ember can turn into a fire that spreads faster than crews can respond to it. This is the part of the story that people miss when they think about hurricane season and wildfire season as two completely separate topics happening in two completely separate parts of the country. They are not separate. They are two symptoms of the same underlying pattern. The same historically powerful El Niño that is suppressing Atlantic hurricanes by increasing wind shear over the ocean is simultaneously locking in drought and above-average heat across large parts of the American West and reshaping the position of the jet stream in ways that will influence storm tracks clear through the winter. One meteorologist working on the long-range outlook explained that unusual, lie-warm patches of ocean water have formed in two specific places this year, in the north-central Pacific and off the coast of Mexico, both acting as their own localized marine heat waves, layered on top of the broader El Niño pattern. Those warm patches are already altering upper-level wind patterns and storm tracks, and forecasters say their full effect on the coming winter will not be entirely clear until closer to October, when a complete long-range winter outlook can be built from the data. What we do know already is that a strong El Niño winter typically shifts and strengthens the southern branch of the jet stream, raising the odds of a wetter pattern across the southern United States, while favoring warmer than average conditions farther north. That is useful information for planning ahead, but it is also a reminder that The effects of what is happening in the ocean right now will not simply end when this particular tropical wave either develops or fizzles out. They are set to ripple through American weather for months. Let us go back to the storm itself for a moment, because that is what most people watching this video actually want to know. What happens next? And does it hit the United States? The honest answer, the answer any responsible forecaster will give you right now, is that it is still genuinely uncertain, and anyone claiming certainty at this stage is not being straight with you. What we do know is the window. Forecasters expect this wave to approach the Leeward Islands within the next few days, and at an absolute minimum, even in a weak or disorganized state, it is likely to bring locally heavy downpours, gusty thunderstorms, and rough surf to the northern Caribbean islands. If it strengthens into an organized tropical storm before it gets there, the risk profile changes substantially, with the potential for flash flooding, damaging wind gusts, and dangerous seas across the Leeward and northern Windward Islands. From there, the storm's future genuinely splits along two very different paths, and which one it takes will depend on small details in the atmosphere that are extremely difficult to forecast, with confidence more than a few days out. Recurve north into the open Atlantic, and it becomes a shipping lane hazard, nothing more, never threatening land. Stay weak and drift west, and it becomes a system that forecasters will be watching every single day as it approaches Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, and potentially the mainland United States sometime in the days ahead. This is exactly the kind of setup that history tells us to take seriously, not because every tropical wave like this becomes a landfalling hurricane, but because the ones that do almost always looked unremarkable in their first few days. The Atlantic does not usually warn you clearly in advance which system is going to be the problem. It gives you a wave that looks disorganized, moving through a hostile environment, and then conditions shift in a way nobody fully predicted 5 days out, and suddenly there's a serious storm bearing down on a coastline that had maybe 72 hours of real warning. That is not fear-mongering. That is simply how a meaningful percentage of the most damaging Atlantic storms in the historical record actually developed. Rapid intensification, storms strengthening dramatically in the final day or two before landfall, has become an increasingly common and increasingly dangerous feature of recent hurricane seasons. And it is precisely the scenario that keeps forecasters up at night when they see warm water sitting close to a populated coastline. Now, let us talk about why this particular moment, this exact convergence of factors, has forecasters using words like alarming instead of their usual measured, careful language. It is not one single thing. It is the stacking of several factors that do not normally line up this cleanly at the same time. You have a historically quiet hurricane season that is now moving into its most dangerous historical window, meaning any storm that does develop now has less competition for attention and less institutional muscle memory freshly built from a busy season to fall back on. You have a tropical wave approaching the exact geographic pinch point, the gap between organized development and complete destruction by wind shear, where a system's fate could genuinely go either way. You have record or near record warm ocean water sitting almost everywhere a storm could possibly need it, both far out in the Atlantic and close to the U.S. coastline, meaning fuel is not the limiting factor anywhere this storm might travel. And layered on top of all of that, you have a historically powerful El Niño that is simultaneously suppressing storm counts while quietly setting up an entirely different disaster risk on the other side of the country, one already actively burning through homes and communities in the American West, as this video is being made. None of this means catastrophe is guaranteed. It genuinely might not be. The most likely outcome, based on where the wind shear currently sits, is that this tropical wave weakens or turns north before ever posing a serious threat to the mainland United States. Most tropical waves that come off Africa in any given season do exactly that, but most is not all. And the entire reason forecasters get paid to watch these systems around the clock is that the ones that beat the odds are the ones that end up on the news for the wrong reasons. The honest professional position right now, from every forecaster covering this story, is not panic and it is not dismissal. It is close, careful, day-by-day monitoring, because the ingredients for something serious are all present in the same place at the same time, even if the final outcome is still genuinely unknown. So here is what actually matters for you, wherever you're watching this from. If you are anywhere along the Gulf Coast, the Southeast Coast, the Eastern Seaboard, or in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, or the Bahamas, this is not the moment to panic. But it is exactly the moment to make sure your hurricane plan is not just a mental note you have been putting off. Know your evacuation zone if you live along the coast. Have a way to get real-time alerts on your phone, whether that is through the National Hurricane Center directly or a trusted weather app. Because when rapid intensification happens, and this year's warm water makes it a real possibility, the difference between a moderate storm and a dangerous one can happen within 24 hours, not several days. Have basic supplies ready before you need them: water, non-perishable food, flashlights, a battery bank for your phone, copies of important documents, and a waterproof bag. These are not dramatic asks. They are the kind of preparation that costs an afternoon and buys you the ability to actually respond calmly if a storm's track does shift toward you with only a few days of warning. And if you are anywhere across the American West, this is not a moment to relax, just because the headlines are currently focused on a tropical wave in the Atlantic. The drought and heat driving this wildfire season are not going away this week, and the same El Niño pattern suppressing Atlantic storms is one of the direct reasons conditions out west have stayed this dry and this dangerous for this long. If you live in a fire-prone area, know your evacuation routes, keep a go bag ready, and pay attention to local red flag warnings the same way people along the coast are being told to pay attention to tropical advisories. Two different disasters, two completely different parts of the country, and one underlying atmospheric pattern connecting both of them. The bigger lesson underneath all of this, the one that applies no matter how this particular tropical wave turns out, is that a quiet season is not the same thing as a safe season. The Atlantic has been unusually calm through most of 2026, and it would be easy to let that calm create a false sense of security, right as the season's most dangerous weeks begin. Every ingredient needed for a serious storm to develop with almost no warning is currently sitting in place across the Atlantic basin. Whether this specific system becomes the one that proves it, or whether it fizzles out exactly the way most tropical waves do, the pattern behind it is not going away. The water is warm, the calendar is moving into the most active stretch of the year. And on the other coast, a historic drought and heat pattern tied to the same climate signal is already burning. We will be tracking every update on this storm as new advisories come in, every shift in the models, every change in where the wind shear sits, because in a season this quiet, the next update is exactly when things can change the fastest. Subscribe so you do not miss it the moment this system gets upgraded. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and whether you're keeping an eye on this one too. Stay ready, stay informed, and we will see you in the next update.